I'm really happy to have with us for this New Earth One event, Sam Pfotenhauer. Sam is a human design reader and intuitive guide. Through her business, Wild River, she facilitates spaces for inner inquiry and connecting to earth, body, and intuition. Sam is also an environmental lawyer. After graduating from Tulane Law School in 2017, she practiced as a securities litigator in New York City, but left that role in August of 2020 to pursue her environmental and spiritual interests. Sam currently works on a range of environmental issues, both in the private sector and in public service, but focuses especially on water-related issues and urban farming, which is an interest she and I have in common. Sam currently lives in Burlington, Vermont with her partner and her cat. Welcome, Sam. You and I have talked before, and as you know, I really appreciate the way that your personal path and your work with others is connecting personal development and connection to earth, self-growth, and assisting in the earth's healing. So I'm really happy to get to talk with you as part of this event.
I am so happy to be here, Chara. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm just, I also love this. I think it's, often in the kind of earth, like specific activities like urban farming or carbon credits or whatever it is, we're missing a little bit of the conversation about how do we connect with earth on a spirit level, on a heart level. And then in the spirituality wellness space, I think we're often missing how do we actually move into action and be involved in our community or whatever channels we're inspired to get connected with.
Yes, so important. And I love that you named that right away, because that's one of the many purposes of this event, is to bring some of these conversations more together in a truly interwoven way, and to remind people that any kind of regenerative action they're trying to take on behalf of the planet needs to be grounded in their own spirituality and wholeness. Similarly, our own independent spiritual or personal development paths are not separate and isolated from what is going on this planet with environmental issues or social justice issues. So I know you totally understand that, and we are going to just keep building that awareness. So I guess that kind of leads to my first question is, can you talk more about that? Because as you said, we kind of have these silos. Oh, you're into personal development, personal growth, spiritual development, or you're out there as an environmental activist. How do you see the crossover, and how would you like to keep giving language to that for other people?
Yeah, totally. So the first thing that I think of is so it's kind of a simple concept, but it's very hard to pour from an empty cup. And folks who are out there involved in their community, who are working in different environmental channels, that can be emotionally challenging work. It can take a very long time to see kind of large scale or even just community-based changes. It can have projects, you hear this all the time with urban farmers putting their heart and soul into their farm and then losing their property and needing to restart again and again and again. And these different things, climate change anxiety can be very overwhelming. And so at a baseline, if you don't have that kind of solid foundation of self-care and self-love to help support you, then you're going to burn out. You won't be able to stay in those spaces. You can't keep others warm, including the environment, by setting yourself on fire. Now, however, I also think there's a lot of value in, and I think this is important for all things. My interest is environmental work because it's just always has pulled me, and I've always loved spending time outside. I've been a scuba diver since I was basically could, and a snorkeler, and I find so much joy in those areas. But I also think that we can't reach a level of cooperation if we are in a place of reactivity all the time. Self-development helps move us from a place of reactivity where we're kind of acting out of our pain, our anger, our trauma, or don't give ourselves permission to feel our emotions, so they leak out in surprising and sometimes disappointing ways. We can't get into a space of really empathy, cooperation, and the fullness of action if we're in that reactivity space. It's very difficult to work with and to connect with other people if you're kind of always just working on getting through the day, getting through in like a survival mindset. And so it kind of feels like it needs to come from that space for it to be sustaining, for it to be generative of joy and love, not of kind of reactivity.
I appreciate that so much. In fact, every sentence you said, I was really kind of sinking into and wanting to amplify. One of the things I was thinking as you were speaking is that, and you partially named this, we also have this problem right now of people who are endeavoring to lead or contribute to environmental restoration, doing so from a place of despair. And I really worry about that a lot for so many reasons. One is that despair is not sustaining. So people who are contributing from a place of a lot of hopelessness or despair are much more likely to burn out, to have mental or physical health consequences of running that kind of neurochemistry. You know, we could talk about this spiritually as a question of vibration, and I love to do that. But we also know now that those heavier emotions, they actually create an inflammatory biochemistry in the body. Additionally, when people are trying to lead or contribute from this place of despair or hopelessness, all is probably lost on this planet, but I'm going to try to contribute anyway. That does not inspire other people. And additionally, you know, as you know, great things are not created from despair and hopelessness. Great things are created from inspiration. I wonder if you could speak to how you see this, because I feel like we need hundreds of voices speaking to this right now. A lot of people are experiencing fear, despair, hopelessness. You mentioned climate anxiety. What might they do if they're willing to consider that that's not actually the best way to live or contribute?
I love this question. And, you know, so I have, as Chara mentioned at the very beginning, a company called Wild River, and I have an Instagram account where I talk about self-development, spirituality, but it started as an environmental education account. It didn't last very long as that because I just had so much, I just wanted to talk about emotions and spirituality so much. But at the beginning it did. And that I felt like I really kind of got to think about this question a lot. I think if you are in that place of climate anxiety, despair, which a lot of us are, I think the number one thing is to prioritize your own peace. And prioritize your own peace with connecting with Earth, connecting with the beauty of Earth, reminding yourself of what is so beautiful here and enjoy the joy of it. The next thing I would say, because if you're not in a place of peace, all the reasons that you just said, it'll burn you out so quickly. Like you won't be able to maintain it and it won't feel good. We're on this planet for a short time, and while we are facing these major catastrophic impacts and changes from human activity, also there's a lot of beauty to be found here. And I think it would be a huge shame to miss out on it out of fear of what may come, or potentially, you know, some certainty that you have will come in the future. The other thing I would say is look, everybody has innumerable options of ways they can be more sustainable. Depending on where you're coming in at this level, for some people, they already live a minimalist lifestyle. They already kind of are mostly plastic free, zero waste. Others are love the environment, but are still in a lot of consumerism, maybe still eating a lot of meat, buying online every single they have. So it comes all this packaging, whatever it is, not involved in their community channels. There are always so many places where you can go if you want to kind of change the way that you're using Earth's resources on a personal level or on a community level. So pick the one that brings you joy. Pick the one that sounds fun. Often I've gone into this, I feel like I need to pick the one that feels the hardest, that will somehow have the biggest impact. All of these things will have a big impact, and all of them will have a small impact because you're one person on a planet with 7 billion people. So there are limitations, but pick the one that you're actually proud of, that you look forward to, that you can make a ritual out of, and make it easy for yourself. If you hate, I used to like take my walk my waste to the composting bin when I lived in New York City. We didn't have one, so it was like a 2 miles on the subway. I would always have this like big bags of frozen waste. And it was so fun for me for a while, until it wasn't, until it became like the hardest thing ever. And then at that point, my partner started doing it for me. But sometimes I wouldn't compost, and instead I did other things because I could either get mad at myself, not do it anyway, and then feel awful, or turn my attention to something that was inspiring, like not eating meat for a few months and learning more of those recipes, or, buying in bulk or whatever it is. So there are always things you can do. And it's silly I think it's a little bit limiting to think that if you kind of don't engage in one practice, that's all these horrible impacts, because if we probably looked carefully at our life, there's a lot of ways we can grow.
I think that's so brilliant, because it reminds me of how we need to outgrow dualistic and self-punitive thinking. And so, part of what you were referring to is this idea that in order to help other people or the earth, I have to sacrifice, and it's going to be hard. That kind of assumption is one of the things that really limited the 20th century environmental movement. And I still talk to people all the time, even people younger than you, who have this assumption that, well, if we sacrifice enough and we're really uncomfortable, we can maybe save the planet. But that's not even the kind of energy we want to be creating from. So I love your recommendation to engage in the ways that are nurturing for you and bring you joy. And it reminds me, I had a friend years ago who was one of the first participants in electric car technology at a time when that technology was a little fiddly and lots of people didn't want to engage, but he loved it. And so it's, I'm sure everybody can think of the save the earth and humanity types of approaches that feel onerous and discouraging and impossible to them, and the ones that are really fun and nourishing and inspiring.
And you get to a point as it builds. Like, I think it's really easy to be like, how am I, especially if you're depending on wherever you are, and be like, I need to make so many changes, and there's no way this could feel fun. Like, there's no way I could have fun without, consuming at this volume or eating these sorts of foods or whatever. And what I would say to that person is, if you are wanting to make a change, and that's coming from a place of love for yourself and love for Earth, not out of guilt, out of the shame or social media performance, but out of a place of love, then start small, because it will build on itself. I'm at a place where, for a while I've been mindful of my clothing and how I am and all of that, but I've expanded to a new level that I just couldn't have done a few years ago, because it just wasn't a match for me and I wasn't ready. And whenever I tried, it would be out of guilt. Same with when I've gone through my vegetarian or plant-based kind of strict phases, it's out of guilt. And then it doesn't feel good physically on my body. And when I've been able to give myself grace and be like, how do I just soften this? How do I include this without it being like totalitarian? Now it's become fun, but I started that 10 years ago. Like, it's taken a long time, but in the course of my lifetime, and we're only speaking about right now, like individual Focuses, of course, we have companies and corporations and all these things that contribute to it. And I know a lot of people are like, well, I shouldn't have to bear this on me. This is overwhelming. And I just want to briefly touch on that. If like, the way I view it is, no, you shouldn't have to bear it all, because it's not all you, like this idea of human or individuals holding all this responsibility was something that was in part kind of pushed by or advocated by companies who didn't want to share that burden. However, this is the only thing fully in your control. So I believe of like, how could I impact or ask others to change something when I'm not willing to even look at it myself? And I think when you're willing to kind of step into that, then it also becomes easier and more inspiring to advocate for things at a system or multinational level.
Yeah. I think that's really, really important to focus on what we can control. And there are a lot of ways to do that. There are various ways that we vote through our personal life choices and expenditures and alignments, and then what we do in our public lives, or volunteering, or communicating with elected officials, or all those variety of responses to the world. What's your sense right now about some ways, well, maybe you only want to recommend one, but at least one way that people who are seeking kind of like a core of connection to their own sense of meaning and the earth can develop that? Because I'm kind of circling back to what you initially said about the need for any kind of genuine and lasting and self-renewing contribution to be connected to self-care, to personal well-being, and to maybe some kind of inner core of meaning and connection to nature. So how do people pursue that or refresh it if they've kind of lost it?
Yeah. So I'm just going to say a few different things because it's hard to narrow it down. The number one thing that I'll say is, are you getting outside? Truly. I love the earth. I like environmental things. I love all of that. If I'm honest with myself and I look at my schedule, it's like, has it been a week or 2 weeks since 3 weeks, 4 weeks, since I've really intimately connected with nature? Going on walks, all of that is amazing, but am I getting outside? And I'm, even for folks who live in the city, I used to live in New York City up until the summer when I moved to Vermont, and getting in nature for me meant going to an extremely busy park, but I could still connect, getting out there without no headphones, no phone, nothing like that. And just spending time really noticing the beauty of earth. And if you are in a busy city, that means noticing the beauty of a tree branch or a leaf. And if you're lucky enough, like I do now, to live in a place with access to trails, getting outside there, but really being intentional with it. So one practice I've been loving, and it's been really fun to share with my family and friends on hikes, is going on a hike, stopping somewhere. If you're in a cold place like I am, this can be kind of tough right now, but I think it's still worth a try. And closing your eyes and spending a few minutes breathing, and then a few minutes on each of your senses. So what can I smell right now? Do I smell anything? Is there a crispness? Whatever is coming through, what do I hear? And what do I feel in my body? What do I feel in my hands? What does the ground feel like? And really spending a few minutes intentionally connecting. I know that probably most people listening or watching this already are really in love and love spending time outside, but sometimes it can almost become like a habit and something that we just do, and something that's part of our checklists, and our minds are elsewhere. That is still amazing thing to do, but bringing it and focusing in on, how do I really engage my whole being with whatever's around me? So that's one thing I'll say. The other thing I'll say is my Aunt Rachel Pfotenhauer, I believe, is speaking at this event, and she has helped me a lot in connecting with Earth consciousness as an energy frequency. I will recommend her and let her speak on that, but that's an important practice to me, where I basically just sit in meditation for a few minutes. Then I envision roots coming from my body and connecting with Earth. And then with each breath, I kind of inhale Earth's grounding supportive energy, and let her know that I'm with her and I hear her and I feel her. And that has been so supportive for me for a number of reasons. It's something now, a practice that I teach to others in my different spiritual modalities in my coaching practice, because first, it's cold here and we can't always get outside, and I needed a way to feel her, and I wanted her to know that I'm here even if I'm not out in nature. Secondly, it's cleared a lot of fear for me. I feel like it's allowed me, when I'm spending time with Earth, I can be grounded. It's easier for me to get out of the future tripping of all the horrible things that could happen, and also out of the future tripping of my own life, of fears in just my personal life, and be present. And then the last thing I would recommend is if you're having a hard time cultivating joy, if you're having a hard time kind of moving through a constant stream of mental chatter, I would encourage you to connect with your body and connect with your heart. So kind of a simple practice for that, I would say, is move in any way that feels good. That could be dancing, that could be stretching, it could be an exercise. It could be self-massage, just connecting with your body, and then take out a journal and literally ask yourself, how am I feeling? What's on my heart? Because your body is picking up things that brings it joy and things that make it feel scared, and is storing all of your emotions. And if there isn't a channel for them to come out, you won't hear it. You won't be able to hear, what am I authentically responding to? What is bringing me a sense of warmth? And where am I reacting out of fear or anxiety that I just need to move because something awful happened, or I'm sad and I haven't given the space for those to really pour out of me?
Yeah, those are really, really excellent practices. I agree. I'm curious about how you find yourself thinking lately, and how you think other people can keep expanding their awareness on the idea that as we are healing and developing ourselves, we are also contributing to the well-being of the whole. So you referred to that earlier when you were talking about how inner trauma or pain that's not handled is going to come out in some way. We might be trying to be the best, most helpful activist on a certain issue, but if we have a lot of unresolved woundedness, or it might not even be trauma and woundedness, it might just be confusion or anxiety or fear, it's going to disrupt our contributions. So, that's one way, and there are a bunch of ways to describe how, as you heal yourself, you are contributing to healing and regeneration for all life on this planet. But I don't know if that still seems abstract to people. So I would just like to hear you give more of your sense of it.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly how you described is correct. And it's probably too big of a discussion for this, but this other modality that I teach, human design, as you know, Chara, it draws on it's so it each person has a chart, kind of similar to Western astrology. There's a lot of overlap with Western astrology, but it also draws on Chinese I Ching and the Kabbalah tree of life, and the Hindu chakra system. And it creates a chart that is kind of like an energetic blueprint of your life, your talents, your skills, places you're prone to insecurity. And in this, we can see whenever everybody is always impacting other people and being impacted by other people in some respect, in some way. And I think a really simple example is if you're ever around someone who's really enthusiastic about something, If they are just coming in and they're genuinely so excited. We often see this with children. I spent the weekend with my 1-year-old niece. So it's her first birthday. She's just so happy. She's such a happy baby. And it's so infectious. Joy is really infectious. So when you're around someone who's really excited and taking inspired action, it motivates you and it expands you in a way that feels different in the body than somebody who is taking action out of guilt or fear. And everybody knows that because we've all experienced it probably at some point, hopefully, being around someone who just loves it, and it just rubs off and you walk away feeling excited yourself. And I think that at its core is what we're really speaking about in human design. We would look at the centers, but in human design, we'd say that for like 70% of the population, they have this special gift where when you're doing work that brings you satisfaction, when it's coming out of this kind of body gut knowing of like, this is the right for me, not because I should do this, not because I feel guilty about it, but because I'm genuinely inspired, it literally fills you up with so much energy and energizes those around you. And it provides this like life force energy for the planet. And we need more of it. Like we need a sense of vitality on earth. It's a energetic, this is more speaking in terms of energetics, but when we talk about vitality on earth, we need vitality in people. It's very hard for earth as our mirrors and our reflection to be in this place of abundance and vitality and thriving when the people on it don't hold it themselves. And so I think cultivating that, plus it's the way I want to live my life and it's the way I want to activate those people around me. I think it's more powerful. I also think it's harder. I think sometimes it's harder because you are to do that. You really have to be open and honest with yourself and often other people with your emotions. And that's vulnerable and scary. But I think you're more potent and powerful when you do.
Yes, and it's harder. I really appreciate that you marked the vulnerability of that because at least in North American culture, and I think a lot of European culture and many cultures around the world, that emotional vulnerability is still not very accepted, although a lot of people are advocating for that as a healthier path. But it's also countercultural to be inspired and joyful. Countercultural in a way that is probably absolutely vital right now to be modeling that vitality. Look at the newspapers or even a lot of social media accounts that supposedly they're the accounts of environmental leaders, but often what I notice they're posting is more about problems and discouragement and reasons to be angry and reasons to be scared. Not that we shouldn't name those things, but that's not modeling vitality and inspiration, right? That's modeling criticism and discouragement. So I really love that you marked that not only does this require an emotional vulnerability that's kind of countercultural, but these emotions or vibrations or perspectives are also kind of countercultural. So, I feel like we should talk more about that, and I'm not sure where to go. I guess one question that comes up for me is that maybe it's necessary to find other people who are also trying to be a light of vitality. But what else do you think feeds that? Because my sense is there are people who are on the cusp right now. Mm-hmm. They've got the old habits of discouragement, criticism, despair, fear, eco-anxiety, climate anxiety. They're also aware that from kind of neuroscientific and spiritual perspectives, that's not the best, but they're sort of teetering. So what should those people do to keep leaning more into the vitality that you named?
First off, giving themselves permission to be happy. It can be, like you said, a radical act to choose joy, particularly when there's so much pain in the world, because for a number of reasons, but one of them can be well, if I'm happy, am I dismissing the true suffering that so many are experiencing? Am I not trying or working hard enough for the pain that, the climate, environmental related pain, of course, all the other pain that's already impacting so many people on this planet? And there's like those concerns, there can be some truth in there. There can be some fear of like, if I choose happiness, am I just kind of turning a blind eye, or am I bypassing something? And my argument would be no. I think you continue to take action. You don't choose happiness because of ignorance. You choose happiness because of, I see all the things that we're up against, and I'm still so grateful for the things that I have, whatever that is. And I'm choosing to celebrate that. I'm choosing to celebrate the fact. I mean, I went to the grocery store it's December in Vermont, and I could buy blueberries, and I am going to make a beautiful soup with lentils, and it's so delicious. And like these are gifts from the earth, and gifts, of course, from all the people and supply chains and things that I have available to me. But that's beautiful. Like there's still so much here, and we'd be missing out on that opportunity and missing out. I think if you're lucky enough to be able to experience the joys of life, then it's your responsibility to embrace it, because not everybody has that, or some people have to work so much harder to feel that joy. And if you can, then you have the opportunity and the responsibility to feel it, embody it, and spread it.
Yeah. And you mentioned choice. And I was thinking as you were talking, I still eat chocolate. I know there are a lot of social justice problems with chocolate, but I celebrate that I am able to choose to buy fair trade chocolate.
Yes.
So that, I think it's a really rich choice point where you can name the things that are terrifying to you. Child slavery in agriculture around the world, mistreatment of women and actually most agricultural workers around the world. But then you can take joy in whatever helpful choices you are able to make in terms of what you're buying that is produced by the agricultural industry. Certainly organic, regenerative, biodynamic, fair trade foods are usually shown to not only be significantly better for Earth, but better for the people who grow them. So I really appreciate that connection you made between not only choosing to be happy, but then appreciating whatever choices you can make that actually are contributing in some way to renewal and well-being and vitality.
Yeah, as you know, and I'm sure most people listening know, it's such a privilege to be able to choose these different environmental things. I get the opportunity to go to a farmer's market. I can afford to buy things there. That is an incredible privilege. And it's something that I'm going to celebrate. And I'm going to celebrate all the hard work that took, because it wasn't that long ago that there were not farmers markets, that those did not exist, that there was not that relationship from kind of farmer to consumer, or that model wasn't in presence in much of the United States. And that's such a gift, and it's so beautiful. And I think that your chocolate example is a really good one, because I think if you look into most things of our lives, there can be problems in there. And sometimes these problems are massive. Like we're talking about, like you said, child slavery or major agricultural issues. And I know that some people listening will not agree with this, and that's okay. But how I choose to live that is, I'm going to choose the things that I'm going to work on that bring me joy right now. I'm going to not go into every single issue. Not that I'm going to kind of have willful ignorance, or I'm not going to be aware of them, but I'm not going to indulge each one, because if I do, I'm going to be so overwhelmed with information. I'm not possibly going to be able to navigate the correct buying choices that are sustaining and like realistic in my life. And I'm going to have a withdrawal, and I'm going to kind of stay stagnant. Right. And I look at my life in times when I've done that, when I've tried to go all into like vegan and no plastic and all of that, I'm literally eating like a ton of Chick-fil-A like 3 weeks later. Like it doesn't, I end up going the other way. It's not
Or
sustainable
you
for
get
me.
so burned out. I mean, and
Yes.
I tried that years ago. I ended up with the worst eco anxiety because
Yes.
everything was a problem. Everything was a problem that I was responsible to fix. And it
Yeah.
was, I was thinking as you were talking, we have to take care of ourselves as human organisms. And you have to realize you as an individual being are not here to save the planet. I mean,
Yes.
maybe in a certain way you are through your vibration, but in terms of trying to get all the aspects of sustainable living correct, it's not possible. It makes you crazy. It burns you out. It doesn't work. So I love the
Yeah.
joy path that you're recommending.
Yeah, I agree. And whenever we do that too, we take on all this responsibility that can't even be fully ours. Like I so agree with what you said earlier. We do vote with our decisions, we vote with our actions, we vote with how we spend. Also, there are things that are out of any single person's ability to control. And so you make the best choice. You kind of continue to challenge yourself to grow, and you give yourself immense grace, because you are facing so many challenges in your life, whether you notice them or not, or whether you've grown so resilient to them, but you are. And it is just to be able to find joy in the everyday, find love and cultivate that is somewhat of a miracle on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also thinking as you talk about that the joy frequency, it's one of the best frequencies for solutions. And so whatever people want to see, true justice and fair and good livelihoods for agricultural workers, for any workers, for people of all races and genders, true habitat restoration and preservation for plants and animals, restoration of our ecosystems and the elements. One of the frequencies that is most compatible with creating all of that is this joy frequency, which holds all kinds of assumptions about well-being is possible, healing is possible, regeneration is possible. Look at all the good that is here. Look at all the good that is happening. Look, I can buy fair trade chocolate, or I can buy organic blueberries, or blueberries from the local cooperative farm, or something like that. So I think about that a lot, and I appreciate that you gave voice to it.
Yeah, it's a gift. And joy is something, if you are out there having a hard time cultivating joy in your life, and you're like, how could I do that? How could I possibly do that? Maybe your family is experiencing or you are experiencing severe health issues. Maybe you hate your job, or you're under financial hard times, or whatever it is. Start simple. Look, anything in your life, go back to whenever you last remembered yourself being happy. Maybe it was when you were a kid, and think about things that you did, and try to challenge yourself to just spend 3-5 minutes a day doing that, 10 minutes, whatever you have the availability in this space for. How can you prioritize joy a little bit? Maybe it's like, I'm just going to do a quick walk between my meetings for a day, because I tend to see something that makes me happy when I do that. I'm just going to listen to a song that used to bring me joy when I was 7 years old. And that's the only thing. And it can start there. Like if the idea of really feeling big joy, because I do think that, yeah, there are some people who kind of, you've probably met them in your life. You always seem happy. Like, and yeah, there are some people who have a little bit of predisposition to joy. And for me, I also feel like you cultivate joy. People who are really happy usually cultivate joy, and they cultivate gratitude. And that's the other thing. Joy can't grow without gratitude. So if you're really having a hard time cultivating joy, start with looking for a few things in your life that you're grateful for, and just take some deep breaths into it to try to feel it in the body, because joy is not felt in the mind, it's felt in the body. So you have to be able to feel in, how my body feeling? What do I feel about this? And ask.
Right. And almost everything that we can feel grateful for ultimately comes from the earth, right? Which is sustaining all of us here. I mean, the sunlight, of course, but then, which is kind of coming in from outside of our planet, but then it's all of these intricate, beautiful life systems that are part of Earth that are pretty much providing and sustaining everything, even our relationships with other people. What do you see in your conversations with people in your generation about how they're perceiving our planetary situation, the human earth situation, the connections between self-development and regeneration for our planet? Do you think your generation is engaging in distinctive perspectives on that, or what's your perception there?
That's a great question. So for anyone who's wondering, I'm 29 years old, so I'm a millennial, but I think you could probably put like older Zoomers and younger Gen X kind of in my general generation. And I think a lot of folks in my generation are overwhelmed with climate anxiety. I think they have no idea how to navigate this. I think they feel like they were left something that they didn't get the choice to engage in, that now has spiraled and grown to something totally out of control. I say that though, and I'm thinking of friends in that, and I'm thinking of, and kind of when I would speak about environmental things, how much people respond to like, thank you for just saying that something with joy, because I get so scared and overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. And it makes me feel like a bad person. There's definitely a lot of like, if you're environmental, then you're good. And if you aren't, then you're bad. And it's so interesting. And I feel like that because whenever I've been involved in environmental things, I get a lot of praise for it. And I am involved in environmental things because that's what my body's drawn to. It's not something where I'm like, this is a good choice and I'm going to dedicate. I think so. But it came first with, I just like this stuff. And then look at all these great reasons. And I think that's how a lot of us make a lot of our decisions. You're a fashion designer because you just love fashion. And then you look for other reasons, or you're whatever it is. It wasn't this like moral kind of like, I wasn't compelled here for moral reasons, but it has given me a good reason to continue to look into it. So I think there's a lot of like, if I don't do this, I'm bad. So either there's a lot of kind of pride, this is the best way to do it, it's rigid, or it's kind of withdrawn and I don't want to feel shamed for this. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to try to take shame out, because shame is very little it's basic, in my opinion, never productive. Some people might disagree with that, but I think it's never productive. I don't think it's ever sustaining. And I think overall it's drawing people away from the environmental movement.
Yeah. No, I think that is completely true. And actually, I mean, as somebody who's older than you are, I would say you're speaking for multiple generations there. And it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, that the moralistic and the dualistic overlays are not helpful, right? Like, oh, I'm environmental and I'm virtuous. She or he are not, they're not virtuous. And this is kind of like an either or. And to be environmental, you have to sacrifice, and it's probably going to be disappointing, excuse me, and your life won't be as fun or joyful.
Yeah.
So,
and you can't be stylish. There's like,
right.
And that's the big, I would say,
Right.
Watching the younger, and this is totally an Instagram thing. I also love, I'm on TikTok. I don't like make TikToks, but I love consuming them. And the one thing I am seeing is, while the younger generation, I would even include younger than me, are aware of environmental things, there doesn't seem to be a decrease in consumerism. There is more of awareness of like, is this made from dead stock, or is this made with sustainable things? And while I think that's a great trend, if you're buying like 100 new pieces of clothing a year, it doesn't matter what they're made from. Like, it's still putting a lot of pressure on our resources. And that isn't really there because everyone wants to be cute and stylish. And you're like, do I have to give this up? There is a whole growing thrifting, like there is a whole other scenes that are really cool, and there's some really cool young environmental influencers that are being very creative and showing like you can have everything secondhand and you can reuse everything. And there are other ways to think about this and be really stylish, but it's definitely outside of the norm.
Also, I think so many of those attitudes that you just named are completely siloing environmentalism in a little box. And that's contrary to everything that you and I are recommending to our listeners, which is more like notice that your whole life and well-being are integrated with what's going on this planet, whether you like it or not. So you might as well engage in a purposeful, centered and joyous participation in trying to make life better here. That's sort of the paradigm shift that we're advocating for. And it's happening in some ways and not yet happening in a lot of others, for sure.
I do think there is some really, like, I have a few friends that are much more involved in like a permaculture scene who are zero waste. So this isn't, I wouldn't say necessarily represented the generation, but it is really neat to see who are very involved in activism for plant medicine and kind of like really integrating relationship with earth in all aspects of your life. You don't have to, like, you can, and one friend I'm thinking of, Liz Bowden, who's a talented healer and a yoga teacher, and she also teaches children, and she also does a lot of microdosing advocacy in Richmond, Virginia. And it's this integrating love of earth into all aspects of our life. It's a relationship. It's a relationship with someone important to you, and your relationship with people important to you infiltrate different areas of your life. Your relationship with yourself infiltrates other areas of your life. It's not just this one thing that you do. It kind of permeates everything. And whenever you allow that to come in, I find it makes making changes kind of to benefit earth or considering earth so much more easy and natural. Just like I recently got engaged, and just like I don't think about, I don't take a trip without considering my fiance. Like I might go without him, or I might, maybe not invite him if I'm going on something I don't think he'd come on, like a girls trip, but I consider him. And earth over the last few years has kind of played into that. It's not just something that I have to do, but it's something that I consider, how does this impact from my personal choices, the greater earth? Maybe I'm not going to change my decision based on that, because maybe it's something I choose not to focus on, or I decide it's not worth the exchange for me in this moment. But it makes it a lot easier and more fun. Like, it doesn't feel hard to consider these things.
Yeah, because you're doing that in an integrated way that is really placing yourself in the life community of planet Earth rather than outside it in some kind of way that isn't really even possible, even though we've lived that way in the last century or two. So, is there anything else that you would like to share? I'll ask you before we close about how people can work with you, but before we talk about that, are there any hanging threads in your mind from things that we've talked about, or any further recommendations you want to offer to people who might want to feel as integrated and joyful and purposeful as I think you have learned to often feel?
Thank you. I will say it's not selfish to prioritize yourself. It's not selfish to prioritize your joy. It's not selfish to prioritize your body, even if that means in that moment, and I'm speaking, even that means in that moment you are not doing something that you would normally do that's kind of sustainable. I'm speaking particularly to people who are, as I suspect much of this audience is, who are already kind of engaged in sustainable living of some sort. So I think I'm just going to give an example. So I, prefer to get fruits and vegetables with no packaging, and, not to buy a cut up onion that comes in plastic. I'll just buy the onion and cut it myself. I used to work in, when I practiced at a law firm in New York City called Davis Polk, I had these really rigorous hours, and sometimes I'd be working 80 plus hours a week for many weeks at a time. I needed to sustain myself. I needed to be able, and I wanted to be able to cook food. So in those times, I would go buy the vegetables cut up that were in plastic, because that's what I needed to do to nourish myself in that moment. The other option would have been buying takeout, which is less healthy and came in everything still. Like, those are my options. And whatever that looks like for you, I just want to give you permission. It's not going to be forever, but if you need to make changes to support yourself, do it. Do it. It's not selfish. Or maybe you're not even considering environmental. It's not selfish to take your time. It's not selfish to cancel plans. It's not selfish to tell, if you have the ability in your life, say, I need time by myself, and I need more time, and I need to sleep more, and I need to listen to my body, what do you want to eat today? It's not selfish to spend money on those things to really nourish yourself, because it will build for a number of reasons. Plus, it's just not, you're inherently worthy and you deserve to feel joy and joyful in your life. But secondly, you will come back, but you will be able to come back in a way that feels stronger and more confident and able. And if you don't take care of yourself in those moments, even if you have to sacrifice things, you're just going to delay this kind of duration in that feeling in that place. Whenever you prioritize yourself and your joy, you will feel it. Your life will feel better. It'll look different. And there's always the added benefit that it often inspires and impacts other people, though that's not the only reason you should do it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate that. And it comes back to a number of things we've talked about and where you began, that nurturing that core of internal well-being and clarity and thriving is one of not only a gift to the collective and even to Earth, but that's the only foundation for really doing your service here. Whatever you feel like you're truly called to contribute in whatever arena, you have to be balanced and nourished and clear in order to really do that. And I think we've had too much of people running around willy-nilly. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this and post on social media and feel great about it. And I think you're again and again talking about, have that inner core, that foundation of connection to yourself, connection to Earth, well-being, then make your contribution.
It will spill out. You will have so much love and joy that you will want somewhere to share it. You will want to give it to others. You'll want to be involved in something. And I think when we think about environmental things, we often are thinking on a big scale, and that's fine. Think that way too. There's no reason to limit your ambition or your impact, but also there's so much benefit in just like, I'm going to just volunteer at the local community garden twice a month. And that's going to be my contribution. Start there. If that brings you joy, start there. Like, that is an impact. You're impacting your community, you're impacting your greater system of food or whatever it is. There's always bigger kind of domino effects. And you get like, I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves is to just release ourselves from the hierarchy of what environmental efforts are more worth our time, energy, or devotion than others.
Oh, I so echo that, because, speaking as a historian and a cultural observer, I really wonder sometimes if we may find that the most highly rated, you must do these things to save the planet, are not always necessarily going to turn out to be the pivotal things. Whereas contributing to a permaculture garden in your neighborhood might in fact turn out to be even more important than getting your household totally off fossil fuels in the next 2 years. We can parse that in so many ways, but I really appreciate how you said that. So people can find you at wildriver.live. Tell us a little bit before we close about how people can work with you, learn more from you.
Sure. So I also have an Instagram at Wild River and a podcast called Wild River too. And I do a few different sort of offerings. So I do human design readings. We barely touched on that, but that is a modality that I share and love. I also share heart medicine readings, which are basically much more like a kind of a meditative mixed with Reiki, if you're familiar with that. So basically, excuse me, we it's about connecting with what's on your heart and kind of clearing some of the energetic density that can prevent us from feeling it. Often it looks like emotional release. So I work, it's like a 75-minute session. I talk with the client, and then we kind of get into a meditative space. We go down and connect with earth consciousness. Always, earth is such a powerful healing container. And then I kind of move what's on your energy field, usually around the heart chakra. That's kind of where I'm most attuned, but also the root and other places too. And then I do a bunch of different types of offerings. So that's when you would want to look at my website or my Instagram. I'm facilitate an 8-week-long program called Soul Group with my dear friend Nadia, that also threads in earth consciousness, but is all about kind of connecting with what's on your heart, inner inquiry, and sharing in community coaching. We do one-off like new moon workshops, solstice. So there's a lot of ways to just kind of, if you want to connect or get to know each other, a lot of kind of like low cost group experiences. And all of those are always listed on my website and Instagram.
Wonderful. I love the heart medicine sessions because I think your work with people's heart energies really kind of encapsulates everything we've talked about today, which is, if you really want to help regenerate life on this planet, it has to come from your heart, and it has to come from your own healing heart. I won't say healed heart because that's a tall order. We're all working on that, but your contribution that is like the highest soul level contribution you can make comes from your own healing heart. So it makes my heart really happy to know that you're supporting people with that, Sam.
Thank you. It's such a gift. I feel so lucky to be able to do this. And it's such a wonderful evolution in my own work. I didn't suspect when I graduated law school 4.5 years ago that this is one of the things I would be doing. And it's such a privilege.
Yeah. Well, I think you're a light, and I'm so happy we got to talk.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. For anyone listening, thank you so much for being here, for spending your time with Chara and I. It's such a pleasure, and I am so grateful to be connected with you.
This has been a presentation of New Earth One Network, your home for New Earth living. Access information, education, and videos on living from the heart in unity consciousness. Visit newearth1.com.